Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions?
There is absolutely no doubt now that Europe, the United States, Israel, as well as England, are preparing a military confrontation with the heavily armed 76 million person Iranian population. And we have the headline by Kurt Nimmo that breaks it all down. Alert: Iran crisis headed for World War III. And he has the links to the mainline communist Chinese government-run newspapers saying they will back Iran during a military attack. The Russians have also deployed some of their fleets and are saying they will defend Syria during an attack. U.S. military forces have been deployed as of last week, Israeli papers reported, with almost no coverage here, between the Lebanon-Syrian border. At least 2,000 U.S. troops were deployed, not for an exercise, but what Jerusalem Post called a deployment to coordinate military operations from air, land, and sea between the U.S., IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. Between the U.S. and IDF forces. As you know, last week, the Iranian government, their head of their Joint Chiefs of Staff and their top admiral both said, if you enter this area and do military drills off our coastline in the Strait of Hormuz, it will be your last warning. You have your last warning. Do not return. That's a quote. Do not return. This is your only warning. Now, the West, if you read the fine print of what the Euro, the EU dictatorship is pushing, the countries aren't allowed to vote on it. They're just in it. They're announcing they're going to start blocking gasoline imports into Iran. They import over 50%, probably 51% of their refined gasoline. And they export oil and then import it back refined. They don't have the money and the infrastructure to refine more than half of the fuel they need. So what they run their country off of, oil. Imagine if the United States had half its gasoline cut off. They are putting Iran into an absolute confrontation mode. Just as Lindsey Williams' source said, just as the Rand Corporation called for 3 years ago, it is happening. On top of this, Saturday, the United States and Israel announced they are going to send, in the next 5 days, their fleets into the Strait of Hormuz, including U.S. missile cruisers with nuclear weapons, Israeli missile cruisers with nuclear weapons, Israeli submarines with nuclear weapons. It is insane what's happening. And if you turn on the news, as I did this morning and last night, you're hearing about Tebow or Tybo or whatever his name is. You're hearing about the latest fashion shows. You're hearing about how great and invincible Mitt, open borders, carbon tax, pro-abortion, anti-gun, Obamacare author, how he's invincible and the presumptive nominee for the Republicans. And CBS, we have a video coming up later. CBS ran a news piece, just as others have done in past polls, and they mentioned first, third, fourth, and fifth, and don't mention Ron Paul in second, right behind Mitt Romney. We have an article on that by Paul Watson at Infowars.com with links to the video as well and a screenshot of the poll. This is the way they treat the American people. Now, why is this Iran situation so important? right as the globalists implode the world economy, have government sign sovereignty in Europe and the U.S. through the super Congress, through the super unelected EU bureaucracy, as the public is told it's their debt when 90+% of it's not your debt. Tens of trillions a year pumped out in Europe, in the U.S., into black hole private banks. They tell Congress, they tell the European individual nations, we won't tell you where the money went. Private lawsuits find out because they're plaintiffs. Some of it's their money. They take people's private money, steal it out of accounts, bring down banks, bring down companies, and then get bailouts from government and don't even use it to prop up companies. They just shut them down and keep it. I mean, the world, according to all the former top federal regulators like William K. Black and others that sent hundreds to prison for just the small S&L, nothing compared to this. This is several orders of magnitude, meaning exponentially, logarithmically bigger. The globalists are madmen. 40-to-1 bets with people's private bank accounts, hailed by the media as absolutely cool, top advisor to Obama, Corzine. Lies to Congress, gets caught, head of the CME Group, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, says he's lying, nobody gets in trouble. I mean, we're seeing magnitudes of corruption by 2 magnitudes at least. 2 logarithmic, exponential, hyperbolic, gargantuan, dwarfing anything ever seen, an orgy of all-out stealing everything. You know why? Because they're going to blow stuff up. They might even nuke cities and firebomb and bomb police stations and blame it on domestic groups. And the whore media will line up and say it's domestic groups. And the good old boys will get out and salute while talk show hosts are being arrested and drug off. That's what the globalists are counting on. Now, I'm telling you, they could say Iran did it. They could say anything. They could release a bioweapon. They could do any false flag you can imagine. But the entire system is set up around continuity of government and total takeover of society. And this is an absolute red-level emergency situation. The globalists have shown that they are so wild with hubris and arrogance that they are capable of anything. We learned a year and a half ago, and nobody got in trouble, that the top 14 insurance companies, themselves subsidiaries of the 6 megabanks, Prudential and others. This was in Bloomberg AP, but never made it in your local paper, never a big nightly news item, made deals to take the death benefits of U.S. troops from World War II through current. I mean, that's cold-blooded, folks, to take people's private insurance policies and to let because the Department of Defense administers them. I mean, these are just naked crooks, but they know how to start a war with a country they've overthrown twice and set up torture groups. And they probably are running the mullahs today to some extent. Iran-Contra helped put them in power in 79. I mean, go look it up if you didn't know the globalists. See, it's the mega banks playing us all off against each other, and they want a giant political diversion. They want a giant political distraction. They want a giant earth-shattering, earth-shaking war, a huge event where aircraft carriers are on fire and missiles are being fired and tactical nukes are being launched into Iran and Iranian sleeper cells, which Iran actually says they've got and will use. The globalists may not have to stage a false flag. They'll have Iranians bombing New York, bombing Los Angeles, bombing Chicago, bombing Austin, Texas, bombing Houston, shooting people in the streets because they're getting nuked and attacked. And the globalists will push the plunger, boom, tactical nuke, say Iran did it, and then it's martial law so hardcore, it's going to make your head spin. And you're going to be ordered to turn your guns in. And you're going to be ordered to swear an oath to them. And you're going to see all the spies they've hired and all the control freaks and all the intelligence units activated on you and lots of televised SWAT teams killing, quote, right-wing extremists and lots of military bases being attacked by the globalists themselves, blamed on domestic groups claiming we work with Al-Qaeda. And Iran. This is the full spectrum warfare of the bankers running America. And once they trigger this war, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a war on the American people. and a war on the Iranians. You better believe it. And it is going to be hellish. Now, I'm telling you, this is in the works, in the cards. What I've told you is a very possible scenario that I can see and reverse engineer from all their action, and I know they've got everything I just said in blueprint model battle plans right now. I just gave you one of their major battle plans right there. Because everything in intelligence is watching movements, and the globalists think you're stupid, so they hide everything in plain view. And about 90% of my prime projection I just gave you is open source information. The rest is knowing the enemy's mind. But they could go with a bio attack and say the Iranians did it, or just say one popped up during this crisis to get us all to unify behind the government. What did they talk about in the New Hampshire debate, the one I watched Saturday night? They kept talking about we need to get the public's trust back. It's all about making them look trustworthy and making them look good and fatherly and nice. Those are all little nobody puppets except Ron Paul. That's why it's anybody but Ron Paul. So I want you to understand, I told you they'd implode Europe over a decade ago through derivatives and use the EU bureaucracy to fully take what sovereignty was left. Boom, it's happening. Bank of the World being announced, every major magazine that's in financial news, that's establishment, economists, Bloomberg, you name it, saying technocrats, unelected, need to run things now. Freedom isn't good. The Constitution's bad. You know, Time Magazine, Newsweek, they're selling tyranny as the answer right now. And I know their plan. I told you 10 years ago they started putting TSA on the streets. Now it's being announced and being done all over the country. You drive up and there's guys with machine guns searching your cars, searching you on the street. They're beta testing total martial law, and they're going to start a civil war. They want a civil war. They're going to march the idiots in Homeland Security up against the American people. We'll be right back. Now, in the midst of a huge confrontation with Iran coming up, Iran says they take it as a military attack if they are put under siege, their industrial civilization. A lot of areas of Iran look like Chicago or Dallas, Texas. Big, glistening, high-rise buildings, people in suits and ties walking around. About 70%, if you look at the general polls, of Iranians are big fans of the U.S., but they're going to be attacked. And they're saying that when their power gets cut off, they are going to go ahead and block the Strait of Hormuz and give Europe and the U.S. the same medicine they're getting. And the Israelis and the U.S. have said, that is the people that run Israel and run the United States have said, you know what, we're going to attack you when you do that. It's like, we're going to cut your power off, and we're going to have terrorists inside your country. I even have a Washington Post article today admitting that the U.S. and Israel are blowing up missile bases and assassinating people in Iran. I mean, whole bases blow up. Whole military command bases blow up. Whole missile bases blow up. Ahmadinejad's driving across a bridge. It blows up right after he drives across it. The Iranians, if they were so crazy, they're just taking it and taking it and taking it and taking it. But they're saying if you cut off half our power, we're going to have to go to war with you. Because siege, embargo, blockade is the oldest form of war. Under international law, Ron Paul has pointed out it's an act of war. Can you imagine if somebody cut off half our fuel? I mean, folks, a lot of the average good old boys, liquor sales, pizza sales go off the charts when there's a war. More than New Year's and Christmas and Thanksgiving combined. I've talked to liquor store owners. I've seen the statistics in the news. When there's a new war, people go get drunk. They have barbecues. They sit there like it's a video game. As the banks that run America use our military to terrorize third world nations, of course they hate us. And then they say, well, if we weren't dependent on oil, we wouldn't have to buy it from them. All the Republicans say that. The big oil companies and banks that run this country don't want the oil to be developed. They're always blocking it. It isn't some little hippie person blocking exploration of oil. It's the big oil companies. It's on record. The Associated Press sued in 2000 and got documents from 1996. We've written big articles on it where the big 10 oil companies got together in meetings and said, we got to buy up all the refineries. There's too much oil. We'll shut it down that way.